Okay, so ready to dive in. Today we're taking a look at some pretty interesting stuff from Dr. Robert Lustig. You might have seen him on The Diary of a CEO, right?
Yeah, definitely.
We've got a bunch of sources that suggest, a totally different way of thinking about this whole weight loss thing, like our health in general, even how we relate to the food industry. And, the goal here is to get a really good grasp of what Dr. Lustig is saying, especially when it comes to sugar, how it messes with our bodies, how it messes with our minds, and, what we can actually take away from all of this, some useful stuff.
What's so interesting right off the bat is that Dr. Lustig, he challenges some of these ideas that we all just sort of accept, right?
Yeah.
Like take calorie counting, for instance.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that's the key to being healthy. But he's saying, no, it's not that simple. He's pointing the finger at sugar, specifically this type called fructose, as the real villain here, right? The thing that's actually causing us to gain weight and making us sick. And he even goes as far as saying that the food industry has kind of hacked our brains to make us crave this stuff, they've set us up to eat way too much sugar.
Exactly. And for you, the listener, whether you're rushing to work or you're trying to wrap your head around a complicated topic, or you're just, someone who likes to learn new things, we're here to cut through the noise. We want to break down Dr. Lustig's main points so that you have those moments where you go, oh, I get it now. But we don't want to overload here.
Yeah, no information overload here.
We're your guides. We're here to help you navigate this important stuff. So let's jump right in, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Lustig starts by talking about the big problem, the elephant in the room. Sugar.
He doesn't mince words, that's for sure. Dr. Lustig thinks all the sugar we're eating is a huge problem, maybe even the biggest threat to our health overall.
Yeah.
Get this. He says if you have just one sugary drink a day, your chances of getting diabetes go up by 29%. Crazy, right?
It is a wild statistic.
Yeah.
And it's not just about diabetes. We've got sources here saying that Dr. Lustig connects high sugar intake to, all sorts of problems, mental health issues, our brains not working as well, dying younger. He even says there's a strong link to ADD.
Mm.
It's kind of scary when you think about it.
It is. And what makes it even scarier is how much sugar is added to the stuff we buy at the store.
Yeah.
Dr. Lustig says the food industry puts sugar in something like 73% of the stuff you find in a grocery store.
73%.
73%. And why? Because it makes people addicted, right? They want you coming back for more sales for them.
It's like they're manipulating us.
Yeah.
And from what I'm hearing, Dr. Lustig feels the same way. He's even involved in some lawsuits against the food industry, right? Because he thinks they're pushing products that they know are bad for us.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
He starts talking about the difference between pleasure and happiness. This is going beyond just the physical effects of sugar and into how it affects our minds.
This is so important to understand. Dr. Lustig, he's like, okay, pleasure, that's that instant gratification, right? It's short-lived, it's physical, it's that dopamine hit.
Right.
Happiness, though, that's different. That's more long-lasting. It's more of an overall feeling of well-being, and it's tied to this other brain chemical called serotonin.
Yeah. And he's arguing that as a society, we've gotten so caught up in chasing these little bursts of pleasure that we've lost sight of true happiness, right? We're all about that instant gratification, and it's making us unhappy in the long run. And, the WHO, they say that globally about 5% of people are dealing with clinical depression.
Yeah.
But here in America, it's a lot higher.
Oh, it is. It's 22%.
22%.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty big sign that something's not right, in terms of our well-being.
Yeah, totally. And the science behind it is it makes sense. When we're always looking for that quick hit of pleasure, that dopamine rush, it actually can lower the amount of serotonin in our brains.
Really?
Yeah. Dopamine can block serotonin from being produced.
Yeah.
So the more we chase those little moments of pleasure, the less happy we might actually feel overall. It's kind of a vicious cycle.
It makes you think about how we want everything right now.
Yeah.
Instant gratification,
Yeah.
It's everywhere. Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty, the science stuff. Dr. Lustig breaks down dietary sugar, which is also called sucrose, into two parts, glucose and fructose.
Right.
And he's really clear that they are not the same.
Definitely not the same.
Even though, a lot of food labels and advertising try to make you think they are.
It's misleading for sure.
Totally. So
Yeah.
glucose, that's essential, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Our bodies need it to function. Every single cell uses it for energy. And get this, our bodies are so good at making sure we have enough glucose that if we don't get it from our diet, we'll make it ourselves.
That's incredible.
Yeah, the body's amazing. Now, fructose is a different story. Dr. Lustig actually calls it the evil twin. He says, especially when you have too much of it, it can actually be bad for you.
It's like the bad guy of the sugar world.
It is. And here's the thing. They both have calories, right? Glucose and fructose.
Right.
But the way our bodies handle them, it's completely different. So Dr. Lustig says that your liver can deal with a small amount of fructose, right? For adults, that's about 6 to 9 teaspoons of dietary sugar a day,
Okay.
which is about 12 grams of fructose.
Yeah.
Now, for kids, it's even less. It's like 4 to 6 grams. That's what their livers can handle without going haywire.
And most people are eating way more than that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Way more.
Dr. Lustig says the average person is eating like 50 grams of fructose a day and a whopping 100 grams of total sugar. That's 4 times the amount of fructose that the liver can handle without causing problems.
That's a lot of sugar.
It is. And the tricky part is, like we were talking about before, a lot of the sugar is hidden.
It's sneaky sugar.
Dr. Lustig keeps saying it's hiding in plain sight in like 73% of processed food. The most he recommends for added sugar is 6 teaspoons a day for adults.
6 teaspoons? That doesn't seem like a lot.
It doesn't, does it? And when you think about it, even something like, a simple breakfast can be loaded with sugar.
Yeah.
He uses the example of a bowl of Fruit Loops and a glass of orange juice. That could have a total of 41 grams of sugar. That's more than a child's supposed to have in a whole day.
Just in one meal.
In one meal, yeah. So it makes you think about the long-term effects, right? Especially for kids. And this is where we get into what happens in our bodies when we eat too much fructose. Dr. Lustig is adamant that it's not just about the calories, it's about how fructose affects our metabolism.
Yeah, it's like a domino effect, right?
Yeah.
Excess fructose can set off all these problems throughout your whole body, messing with your physical health, your mental health, even playing a part in bigger societal issues. Dr. Lustig even says it could be a major contributor to ADD and depression.
Wow.
Yeah. And he talks about this study they did at UCSF with obese kids. They took added sugar out of their diets, but kept their calorie intake and their weight the same. Within 10 days, their metabolic health was so much better. Their blood pressure, blood sugar, insulin levels, lactate levels, everything improved.
That's incredible. 10 days.
10 days. It's crazy. And what's even more interesting, the parents said their kids were acting up, like withdrawal symptoms, during the first 5 days. Like they were getting cranky and irritable. It just shows you how addictive sugar can be.
Yeah, how your body reacts when you take it away.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about the food industry's role in all of this. Dr. Lustig's pretty outspoken about their influence and how they present information about sugar.
He doesn't hold back.
He doesn't. He says the food industry is powerful, and they've been working hard to keep the truth about sugar's harmful effects quiet for decades. He even brings up some pretty shocking historical examples, like how the sugar industry paid scientists at Harvard back in 1965 to downplay the risks of sugar and blame saturated fat instead.
It's kind of messed up when you think about it.
It is, right, like they were manipulating the narrative. And it wasn't just about downplaying risks.
No.
He talks about how they interfered with the National Institute of Dental Research, trying to get them to stop focusing on the link between sugar and cavities, and instead put money towards developing a vaccine for cavities, which, as he points out, hasn't really worked out.
No, it hasn't. It's really eye-opening to see how much influence they've had on the conversation around sugar and health.
Yeah. And then Dr. Lustig hits us with these statistics that are kind of terrifying. He suggests that by 2050, obesity might be the norm. Yeah. And he also points out that having metabolic syndrome can actually shorten your lifespan by 15 to 20 years. And that global sugar consumption has tripled in the last 50 years. Tripled.
Wow, that's a lot of sugar.
Yeah. Sobering, right? Okay, let's zoom in on one particular source of sugar that many of us consume, beverages. Dr. Lustig says that a big chunk, like 33%, of the sugar we eat comes from what we drink.
That makes sense, like soda and juice and stuff.
Yeah.
It all adds up.
And the risks that come with sugary drinks, they're serious. Like we talked about before, just one a day can bump up your risk of diabetes by 29%. Have 2, and that risk almost doubles to 58%. And diabetes is a major killer worldwide, so this is a big public health problem.
Definitely. What about diet drinks, though? Like, they don't have any sugar. They don't have any calories.
Right.
They've got to be healthier. Right.
You would think, right?
Yeah.
But Dr. Lustig has some interesting thoughts on this, too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Lay it on me.
Okay, so they might seem like the better option because there's no sugar, no calories. But diet drinks come with their own set of issues. Dr. Lustig explains that just the sweet taste, even though there's no actual sugar there, can trigger your body to release insulin.
Really? So even if there's nothing to break down, your body's like, okay, here comes the sugar.
Exactly. Like it's preparing for the sugar rush,
Yeah.
but it never comes.
Hmm.
And constantly triggering this insulin response over time, it could be bad news.
Gotcha. But that's not the only issue, right?
No, there's more. Dr. Lustig also talks about how diet drinks can affect your gut microbiome, all those bacteria living in your digestive system.
The gut microbiome, everyone's talking about it these days.
Right. It's so important.
What does he say about it?
He says that those artificial sweeteners, they can actually change the balance of bacteria in your gut.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and that can lead to problems like irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease, even inflammation throughout your body.
So it's not just about your gut health, it's about your overall health.
Exactly. And this connection between your gut and your overall well-being is a big deal in research these days. So the idea that diet drinks could mess with your microbiome, it's pretty significant.
Definitely something to think about. So we've talked about drinks. What about the broader effects of too much sugar on your hormones and your liver?
Right. Well, Dr. Lustig says that eating a lot of sugar can disrupt your body's insulin response, lead to fatty liver disease, and even affect how your kidneys work, which can cause high blood pressure.
It's like a cascade of problems.
Yeah. And then there are the mitochondria, which are like these little energy factories inside your cells.
Right, the powerhouses of the cell.
Exactly. And here's the interesting part. Fructose can actually make your mitochondria less efficient. So even though fructose has calories, it actually makes it harder for your body to produce usable energy.
Wait, so even though it has calories, it can mess up your energy production?
Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive.
It is.
And it really challenges this idea of calories in, calories out.
Right, like it's not just about how many calories you eat.
Exactly. And this brings us to Dr. Lustig's call to #KillTheCalorie. He says it's a misleading way to think about food. Just because something has a certain number of calories doesn't tell you how your body will actually use that energy.
Makes sense, like different nutrients affect our bodies differently.
Right. And he points out that the effects of different things like glucose and fructose are totally different, even if they have the same number of calories.
So what about yo-yo dieting? A lot of people try to lose weight by strictly cutting calories, and they end up gaining it all back.
Yeah, that's a classic problem. And Dr. Lustig links that to insulin resistance and fat building up in the liver. He explains that high insulin levels can block leptin, which is the hormone that tells your brain you're full.
So you end up feeling hungrier.
Exactly. And that makes you want to eat more, and you often end up regaining the weight, but as unhealthy fat from refined carbs and sugar.
So if calorie counting isn't the answer, what does Dr. Lustig recommend?
He says focus on lowering your insulin levels. He's adamant that you can't gain weight without insulin because it's the hormone that stores energy. He's even turned his obesity clinic into what he calls an insulin reduction clinic.
Interesting. How do you lower your insulin levels?
He emphasizes cutting back on refined carbs and dietary sugar. And he acknowledges that sugar can be addictive because fructose stimulates the reward center in your brain. It's tough, especially when you're stressed.
Yeah, stress eating is a real thing.
It is. And when you're stressed, your amygdala, the part of your brain that deals with fear and stress, needs more energy. Even though fructose isn't a great source of usable energy, your body craves that quick dopamine hit that sugar provides.
So what's the simple takeaway here? What can people actually do?
Dr. Lustig's advice is to eat real food.
Real food? Like what's that?
He defines it as anything that comes directly from the ground or from animals that ate stuff from the ground. Basically whole, unprocessed foods. Processed foods with added sugar, he says, are bad for you.
Okay, so ditch the processed stuff.
Yeah. And he warns about tricky labeling. He says there are over 262 different names for sugar used in food products. Like he gives this example of white raisins in Raisin Bran being dipped in a sugar solution.
Wow. You wouldn't even know.
Right. It makes it hard to make healthy choices.
It does. Is there anything else besides what we eat that we need to be aware of?
Yes. He talks about these things called environmental obesogens.
Environmental obesogens.
Yeah. Have you heard of them?
I don't think so.
Okay, so these are chemicals in our environment that can make us gain weight. They actually encourage fat cells to grow and develop, and it doesn't matter how many calories you eat.
So it's like these chemicals are messing with our bodies, making us store fat.
Exactly. And they're surprisingly common. PFAS, which are found in non-stick cookware like Teflon, tubular tin and boat paint, BPA in receipts and can linings, salads in plastics, parabens in cosmetics, even some pesticides.
Wow, so they're everywhere.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And they act like endocrine disruptors, which means they can mimic your hormones and mess with your body's normal functions.
That's kind of scary.
It is. Okay, another thing Dr. Lustig emphasizes is fiber.
Fiber's good for you, right?
It is, especially for your gut microbiome.
What does it do?
Well, it acts as food for the good bacteria in your gut. It helps them grow and diversify. And then those bacteria produce these important substances, like short-chain fatty acids, which are good for your immune system.
Right. So we need fiber for a healthy gut, which means a healthy body overall.
Exactly. But most of us aren't getting enough fiber.
Why not?
Dr. Lustig says the food industry often takes fiber out of processed foods because it messes with the freezing process and makes it harder to store fruits and vegetables for a long time.
So it's about convenience and shelf life again.
Yeah. And this brings us to a really important point. The balance between personal responsibility and, like, the bigger societal things that affect our health and what we eat.
Okay, what does he say about that?
Dr. Lustig argues that we might not have as much free will as we think, especially when it comes to things like sugar cravings.
Like we're programmed to want it.
Kind of. He quotes Arthur Schopenhauer, who said, "You are allowed to do what you want, but you are not allowed to want what you want."
That's deep.
It is. And what he's saying is that, sure, you can choose to eat different things. But those cravings, those underlying desires, they're often driven by your biochemistry, by the way your body works, and by external things, like how the food industry designs and markets their products.
So it's not just about willpower, it's about all these other factors influencing us.
Exactly. And because of that, Dr. Lustig believes that things like obesity, they're not just a personal failing, they're a public health crisis.
And that we need bigger solutions, not just individual ones.
Right. He even brings up how the UK successfully regulated sodium levels. That's an example of a public health measure that actually worked. And get this, he's working with a company in the Middle East to redesign their entire product line based on 3 principles. Protect the liver, feed the gut, support the brain.
That's awesome. It's like a holistic approach to making food healthier.
It is. Now, I know there's a lot of information out there, and some of it is, conflicting.
Definitely. How do you know what to believe?
Right. Well, Dr. Lustig has this framework for evaluating information and for improving your mental and metabolic health. He calls it the 4 C's for contentment.
4 C's for contentment. I like it. What are they?
Connect, contribute, cope, and cook.
Okay, break it down for me.
All right. So connect is about real social interaction.
Like face-to-face, not just online.
Right. That helps boost your serotonin levels, which makes you feel happier. Contribute means finding ways to give back to others, to have a purpose.
That makes sense. Helping others makes you feel good.
Yeah. Cope is about taking care of yourself, getting enough sleep, practicing mindfulness, exercising, all that good stuff. That helps lower your cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And lastly, cook.
Cooking at home, huh?
Yep.
Yeah.
When you cook your own food, you can control the ingredients. You can make sure you're getting enough tryptophan, which your body needs to make serotonin, and omega-3 fatty acids, while also limiting fructose and processed stuff.
So it's all about making healthy choices and managing stress.
Exactly. And those simple lifestyle choices can really make a difference.
They can. So what's the final takeaway from all of this?
Dr. Lustig suggests that all these problems we're facing, with our health, mental health, even global issues, they might be linked. He thinks a big part of the problem is a poorly functioning amygdala.
The amygdala.
Yeah, that's the part of your brain that handles fear and stress. He says it's constantly being bombarded by stress, by ultra-processed foods, by all the stuff that comes with modern life.
So our brains are kind of on overdrive?
Yeah, and until we deal with that underlying issue, we might just be treating the symptoms, not the real cause of these problems. So for you, the listener, you came here to learn something new, to have those aha moments. We've gone deep into Dr. Lustig's arguments, and he's definitely challenging some of the common ideas about calories and the role of sugar, especially fructose, in our health.
He's given us a whole new way of looking at things, emphasizing things like controlling insulin levels, understanding how important the gut microbiome is, being aware of environmental obesogens, even questioning this idea that it's all about personal responsibility when it comes to food choices.
Exactly. So take his advice. Focus on real, whole foods. Be aware of the hidden sugars in processed stuff.
And watch out for diet drinks and those environmental factors.
Yeah. And maybe try incorporating those 4 C's for contentment into your life. It's a holistic way to boost your health and mental clarity.
This leads to a final thought for you to ponder.
Okay, go for it.
If Dr. Lustig is right about this dysfunctional amygdala being at the root of so many of our problems, How might understanding the things that affect our brains, like biochemically, change how we think about personal health, the well-being of our communities, and even global issues?
That is a really good question.
Like, what if we've been wrong about this idea of individual control all along?
It's definitely something to keep thinking about.
It is.
Thanks for joining us today on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.
See you then.